Alright, well, hello, good morning. Welcome to today's adventure. Today we are in Morristown, New Jersey, and we're going to head out to the Morristown National Historical Park. So this is where Washington and his army camped in the winter of 1777. So we'll go through the park, show you some of the interesting sights. It's quite a lot to see here, so we'll try to fit it all in. But yeah, so let's go. Let's check out this important Revolutionary War remembrance site. Traveling around and come with me. All right, we're going to take a tour of Washington's headquarters. This is where he was headquartered in the winter of 1779. I misspoke. It was 1779 to 1780 is when Washington and his army wintered here. So we're going to take a tour of the house and I'll show you the museum, and then we'll explore some of the other areas in here. There's a lot to see here, so let's go check out this tour. All right, that's the Ford Mansion. That's where we're going. That is the house that George Washington stayed in when his army was camped in. So we're gonna go inside, check this out. Should be a pretty interesting tour.
It's been a museum opened up to the public. Over that time, of course, things have broken. Things have been remodeled. So not everything's original. None of the window glasses are original. None of the plasters are original. Probably not a lot of the flooring. But the beams, the framework, moldings, one of the doors, this door, they're original. The furniture you're going to see for the most part are antiques from the period, but only a couple of the pieces actually belong to the Ford family. We also use replicas. We use them to fill in the gaps in the picture. And the replicas sort of give you an idea of what it looked like when Washington was actually here. When he moves in, it's not just Washington. Washington brings 5 officers, his aides to camp, his secretary, Alexander Hamilton. It's called, they take over the entire upstairs as bedrooms. They take over the study and the parlor here as office space, which leaves Mrs. Ford with 2 rooms. She gets to keep her dining room over here behind this door, and the sitting room, which would be sort of like your family room. All right, the room we just passed through over here, the family would have called it a sitting room. In your house, you'd probably call it the family room. It's the casual room in the house. During this winter, though, it becomes the bedroom for Mrs. Ford's 3 boys, who range in age from 17 to 15 to 8 years old. Then up there, but there's only one fireplace to cook in. So it'd be like sharing your stove with company on Thanksgiving. Then to make it worse, the servants all ate their meals in there. They spent their free time in there. It just got too crowded. People weren't happy. Very simple rooms. Those are for servants. Then you're going to go up a couple more stairs. You're going to walk through an officer's bedroom. Then you'll come to a big hallway where we're going to stop. And off of that hallway, you'll see another officer.
It would settle.
Free time.
Yeah, nothing to do for 6 months except sit and wait.
Servants. Remember, in those days, they don't have all those nice appliances we have. Just doing your laundry in the 18th century was a 2 or 3 day job. So if you've got money, you can't go out and buy a Maytag, but you could buy a slave or you could hire people to work for you. The Fords, being wealthy, would have had servants, probably enslaved people. We just don't have any record to tell us. We know the headquarters brings at least 18 servants into this house, and they run the whole gambit. Some are men, some are women, some are black, some are white, some were enslaved, some were free. They didn't all fit in those 2 rooms, though. We have 2 attics. They were most likely sleeping in the attics. Some of them were probably sleeping right on this floor. Furniture, not quite like what you guys use, but they have camp furniture, which includes these beds. These are replicas of an officer's camp bed. It was meant to be used inside a tent. That's why it's not really tall. The curtains are there.
All right, that was a very interesting tour of the Ford Mansion. That is where Washington stayed for 6 months here in the winter of 1779 and 1780. Got to see some of the rooms. And then in June of 1780, they left. So interesting. So we're going to go check out the museum. See if there's anything interesting there, and then we'll go down to Fort Nonsense, and I'll tell you about that when we get there. All right, well, we made it to Fort Nonsense, the second stop on this tour through Morristown National Historical Park. This was an earthworks just strategic area built by Washington. I'll show you a little history of this. It also happens to be the highest point in Morristown. That's cool. I'm knocking off a city high point. It's supposed to give us great views of the city. So I'll show you a little bit of history of this, and then we'll explore a little bit here. All right, so here's a little bit of history. So General Washington ordered the construction of an earthen fort on Kinney's Hill in the spring of 1777 to provide a safe retreat in case of necessity for soldiers guarding military supplies. It is being the highest point in town. It's a good defensive position. They leveled the trees, dug trenches, erected earthen wells, and built a guardhouse for 30 men in order to fortify the hill. Referred to as the Upper Redoubt, it was probably one of several small forts in and around Morristown. By the 19th century, the local population began to speculate why a fort was built, but never attacked. A news story spread that claimed Washington had the fort constructed to keep idle soldiers busy during the winter, so everyone began calling it Fort Nonsense. So that's a little history of this. This is basically built, it was never attacked, it was built as like a worst case scenario in case the troops needed someplace to go to. It never was used, and there's very little of the fort left today, but we'll just walk around here for a little bit and see what's here. They have a little historical stone marker. This marks the site of Fort Nonsense. It was an earthwork built by the Continental Army in the winter of 1779 and 1780, and this was erected by the Washington Association of New Jersey in 1888. So, a little history here. We'll walk along this path. There is a cannon. I think there's an overlook down there. So, not much here, but we'll check it out real quickly. You can see a little bit of the town of Morristown down there, Morristown, New Jersey. Yeah, a little foggy today, but you can see that is the town of Morristown, New Jersey down there. You can kind of see the little overlook there. You can see why Washington wanted this, because you can see the surrounding areas. Zoom out for you a second. So yeah, you can see how this would be very useful if you're trying to protect the area, but it was never used. The British never attacked, so this kind of just sat here unnecessarily. Another reason Washington chose Morristown as his headquarters is because it's very close to the nearby iron furnaces in northern New Jersey. Very heavy production of iron, and then they used that. They actually put a chain. I didn't know, they actually put 2 chains of large iron links across the Hudson River, so the British warships couldn't. I never knew that, but yeah, they did a giant chain from side to side of the Hudson, so the British warships couldn't get through. So yeah, they have a one of the links of the chain in the museum in there, which I just saw. So that's fascinating stuff. So you can see, well, we're kind of on a little bit ridge here. Like I said, not much to this, but there's definitely the high ground here. We'll walk back this way. You can see the parking lot's just down there, so not too much up here. Probably come have a picnic here. Just relax. There is a hiking trail down here. I'm not sure where this goes. We'll follow that a little bit. I don't know if there's an overlook there or not, but we'll go down there a little bit, see what's down there. Alright, the elevation here is 591 feet above sea level. Of course, New Jersey is not a very mountainous state, but it's definitely the highest point here, because Morristown is, you can definitely see in all directions. So there's where the sign was. You can see the town there through the trees. Then over here, there's the parking lot there. You see the overlook there. There's a cannon there. Definitely a strategic point if you're trying to watch the British movement. But yeah, this was never used, so it just kind of sat here, and there's not much archaeological evidence to know the way this was laid out. So anyway, a short little stop. We're going to move down to Jockey Hollow, which is where the troops were actually stationed. There were 10,000 troops stationed there, and I'll explain more of that when we get there. So this was a quick little stop. Fort Nonsense, a fort that was built on the high ground, the highest point in Morristown, but never used in the war. The British never attacked, so the troops never had to retreat here. So, all right, we made it to the Jockey Hollow Visitor Center. We'll go in a second, but here we are. So we're in Morristown area. So here was Fort Nonsense. So we are down this way. This is Fort Nonsense, and then the Washington headquarters is here. So we drove through, so it's right in the Morristown proper. So this was actually the site of where the soldiers camped. There were about 10,000 soldiers here in the winter of 1779-1780. And there's also so much of this land belonged to Henry Wick, who allowed Major General Arthur St. Clair to quarter in his home. And despite shortages of food and clothing, only about 100 soldiers died, while the remainder of the army continued to serve until independence was won. So everyone's familiar with Valley Forge. That gets all the publicity on Washington camp here. But this was actually a larger camp. They camped there for more than one winter. And there were fewer casualties here. So there were about 10,000 men here. And they're saying of the 10,000 soldiers, of the 10,000, only about 100 perished, which is far different from Valley Forge. So this is a lesser known encampment area. So let's go in the visitor center and check this out and see what they have. Alright, so this is a replica of the huts that were built here at Jockey Hollow, where the soldiers stayed. You can see very, very bare bones. It does look cozy, but of course they didn't have any heating back there, so it was very susceptible to the cold. And the winter of 1780 is recorded as one of the worst winters ever recorded. They had 4 different types of snowfall, and a lot of the troops didn't have much to eat because they couldn't get supplies in because there was no plows back then, and it was very tough to navigate the roads because of all the snow. There were probably about 4 feet of snow at the time, so it was very, very harsh conditions. Money was practically worthless, because the soldiers weren't getting paid. A lot of them hadn't been paid in months. One soldier wrote that he went for 4 days without eating anything. They were gnawing bits off of bark. So very, very hostile conditions here. But despite that, only 100 troops died here, which is saying something. And why is that? Because they learned a lot of differences from Valley Forge, because this is 2 years after Valley Forge. So they built the huts up above the floodplain so it wouldn't get wet. And you can see the roof is sloped, so that would help with the water not getting down into it. So that's, if you've ever been to Valley Forge, the roofs are built flat. Here the slopes. So they learned a lot of lessons by building the sloped roof and by building the huts off the ground, on a high ground, so they wouldn't be as susceptible to flooding. So that's one of the main reasons why. So we're going to take a look around. We're going to take a tour of the Wick House. So I'll show you that coming up. You can see General Washington behind me. But yeah, a lesser known park here that doesn't get as much pub as its neighbor to the south, Valley Forge. Alright, so here's a little rendering of what they thought Fort Nonsense looked like back in 1777. See, it's very, very basic. They just had readouts around and so this was basically a last resort option in case the British attacked. But kind of like, and they do have a little archaeological research, so that's kind of what it looked like back in 1777 for Fort Nonsense.
This larger room would generally be considered the family's living room, while there's a smaller room that is considered the master bedroom. But as in most cases, when you have guests spending more than a night, things kind of get rearranged, and thus instead of being truly looking like just a living room, we have a bed set up in the living room. But we're not 100% sure if Henry and Mary are staying in this room or if they are actually remaining in their master bed. This space that Major General Arthur Sinclair and his 2 aides-de-camp are going to stay. Guest bedroom is set up as the space for Major General Arthur Sinclair, while this room is more set up for his 2 aides-de-camp / a workspace for all the paperwork that the 3 officers will need to do throughout the day during the time that the Continental Army is here. Because Major General Arthur Sinclair is in charge of all of our Pennsylvania troops, as you either hike or drive through the park, huts that you're going to see.
That was cool. Quick little tour of the Wick House. So the Wicks were the largest landowners here in Morris County. General St. Clair, who was the commander of the Pennsylvania troops, was stationed there. A couple of his aides. They picked this area to camp because it was full of trees, and they knew that the trees would provide timber to build huts for the men. So the men were in tents up until December. They stayed in tents, and then once the huts were built, the one you saw inside the museum, there were 12 people per hut plus the wives and kids. So you can see how small it was and how cramped that would be. So not the most ideal condition. So we're gonna take a walk around. There's a couple trails here. We do hike some trails. I think there's one with an overlook. I won't turn on an overlook, so we'll check that out, and we'll walk around the property here a little bit. So, but that's a short but sweet tour. An old-timey well. Pretty neat. This is the smokehouse out here for smoking all your meats and cooking outside if you want to. As you can see, the garden. There's the garden there, and all the land planted here. So. Alright, we stopped here at the Pennsylvania line. Let me show you here on the map. Alright, so we were at the visitor center. We took this tour road up. There's the Wick House we saw. And right now here, we're going to walk up to the huts and the Pennsylvania line encampment site of 1779-1780. So we can continue on the tour road, and this would be the height. There's a scenic lookout here. Take out here. So we're up here. Alright, let's see what these huts look like. Yeah, we're gonna go up here to where those huts are up here. These would be the replica huts of where the soldiers stayed. So check this out. Parking lot's right over there. You can see my car over there. Wide engine. So we're gonna go right up there. Alright, let's walk up here. Check out these cabins. Not like cabins, but soldiers' hut. These are replicas, obviously. The sign back there said these were built by the CCC as remembrance. They were very strict in dimensional standards at 14 feet wide by 16 feet long and front wall 6.5 feet high. And if they weren't built to those specifications, they'd be torn down and start over again. Each hut was only 12 soldiers where they cooked and ate their meager rations, warmed their frozen bodies, and slept until they were called to duty. All right, let's check these out. All right, this is where they stayed. They would have beds up here and down here, probably on this side too, but you can see how the roof is slanted, so if it would rain, it would not fall in, it would fall down. Man, pretty cool. See these woods all hand carved. Here's a better look at how they were laid out. So these would hold 2 officers, one here and one there. So it's 2, 4, 6 on each side. So they would hold 12 officers. 2, so 2 in each. So you can see these would be very cramped quarters. They did have a fireplace because it would get cold in the winter. So that's how they would keep warm. You can see how tight this is. There's not a lot of room in here between these two. And this probably wasn't the most comfortable because they didn't have, pillows or the comforts of bed. They were sleeping on this out in the cold. Pretty rough conditions. When we hear the term roughing it, they were roughing it out here for sure. Got little windows there. Got one lonely window over here. Yeah, so whoever had this one here, they had the prime spot because they could look out the window. All right, so those down there are the soldiers' huts. They were all built to the same dimensions. This one here is the officer's hut, and they were not limited to a specific dimension. So the soldiers have moved into their huts by Christmas of 1779, but officers did not move in until much later. So unlike the soldiers' huts, the officers' huts did not have required dimensions. They were usually a lot cozier than the soldiers' hut. So let's take a look and see what this is up here. So it looks like this is still a work in progress up here because there's no door inside and they have like some sort of levee here. So this whole area looks like it's still being redeveloped because they have fresh wood here. There's no door here and no way to get inside. So looks like this is still a work in progress. Even the first soldiers hut there, there's no way in there, and the last one is closed because they're reconstructing it. So this whole area, you can see, it looks like they have some sort of path here. But this whole area is a work in progress. But it's a fascinating look at how the soldiers used to live. So we will leave this go. We'll head out of here. We'll head out to our next destination. But fascinating stuff. Who says time travel doesn't exist? You just come to one of these military parks and they'll take you right back in time to a much more different era than what we're in now. All right, stopped here on the side of the road. So this was the site of what's called the Grand Parade. So this is where the soldiers would come in the morning to be inspected, and general orders from Washington's headquarters were distributed. They also had formal military reviews here, and on occasion, those guilty of very serious crimes were executed and buried here. So this was basically where they met every morning before they go to battle, and they would be inspected. for uniform compliance, that they were all looking sharp. The cartridge boxes here. So here inspections, faces, hands washed, beards clean shaven, hair combed and tied up long enough, so you will expect it to look professional out there. And cartridge boxes, because George Washington worried that if they would get wet, your musket was useless. So because of this, Captain inspected cartridge boxes every morning. So this is where this was mainly the main gathering place here before battle, just to make sure that they had everything they needed, and formal military reviews here. So if you were doing a good job or not, this is where they would give you your review on how are you doing. So just a little stop here along the road. We're going to continue on, but fascinating area here. All right, decided to go for a short hike. We're on the New York Brigade Trail, and we're going down to the Grand Loop Trail, and this will take us to Overlook and the monument of where the New York Brigade was. So let's head down this way, and we're going down here. It's the whole trail, the loop is 3 miles. So nice easy hike, hopefully. I came across this lake here in the woods. This little bench, nice place to take a rest here. All right. I've just been having a nice walk through the woods, but it's taking me past this large, beautiful house here. I mean, like a private driveway, but this is where the this is where the trail's taking me. So looks like we're outside the park boundary just barely, but you can see the blue places up there. That's what I'm following. Yeah, see, we're just outside the park boundary. Alright, but you can see, seeing the same thing I am seeing blazes. So we're gonna cut off to the left here. Alright, we made it to the Starks Brigade Monument. This is where they were occupied during the war. So this came about by Emory McClintock, who was a wealthy insurance executive, erected this monument on his property around 1900. This trail was originally a road built by McClintock, and when the road was being proposed, he realized that it would disturb the remains of the soldiers' huts. So this monument is built with the stones from the fireplaces, using construction of this monument. So that's pretty cool. So that stone, the stone for the monument was in the original soldier's hut that was built here. So pretty neat. We're gonna go check out the overlook. I don't know how good this is, but yeah, there's a little bench down there, and see the overlook here. I'm not sure how good this is, but let's take a look down here. Yeah, it's an okay overlook. It's a cloudy, if it's a sunny day it might be better, but it's very misty and foggy out today. And the noise you hear down there is Interstate 287. So that kind of ruins the ambience, but it's decent. Probably on a clear day it will be a little bit better, because you can probably see past the hills out there. Alright, well yeah, this overlooks okay. There's a nice bench here to sit. The weather's not ideal, and the noise of Interstate 287 spoils a little bit, but it's still peaceful on the northern one here. So we're gonna head back to the parking lot, and I don't know if there's anything else to see. I'm not gonna do the whole loop. I'm just gonna go back the way I came. I think it's shorter that way. I don't feel like doing an extra mile and a half now, so we'll just go back the way it came. So I will meet you back in the parking lot, but yeah, decent overlook. Alright, we made it back to the parking lot. All told about 2 miles, a mile in, a mile back. Very easy trail. I saw somebody with a stroller and kids on there, so very easy to go out to the overlook and see the monument. So I think we're going to wrap it up here from Morristown. It's a good branch of history, and one that many people may not know about because of Valley Forge gets all the pub, but Morristown is just as important. So if you get a chance, come out here to Morristown, take a look at where Washington spent most of his winters. He was actually here for 4 winters, well, parts of 4 winters, but the one they set up here in 1779 was the longest, 6 months. So, and the largest. He had 10,000 troops here. So, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a message. And we'll see you next adventure.